guys, how you doing? I hope you're having a great morning.
Yeah, good morning and welcome to Ivy Youth Sundays.
Ivy Youth Sundays, guess where we are? There's a big clue behind us here. Well, actually, this week we've been helping out at Launch Conference, which Ivy's been running, and it has been amazing and has brought us much happiness, hasn't it?
It's brought us great joy.
Great joy.
Nothing makes me more joyful than servants.
Beautiful. It's a great link because today's youth is all about joy. So we're going to ask some people what brings them joy and happiness. So, let's go.
What brings me joy and happiness is playing music and listening to music.
So I've got 4 children and a beautiful wife, and she's incredible. My kids are unreal. That really counts. Totally, without question, always a big family, of course.
Be happy. Yeah. Are you recording right now?
Yes.
Peanut butter.
What makes me happy is when you find out that somebody did something. It's like the other week I came home and there was a curry waiting by our front door, and it was like somebody sent me a curry and I thought this is either a witch trying to poison us or God wanting to bless us. And I went with the option of it being God wanting to bless us, and I was really hungry, and so I had this curry. It turned out it was somebody from Ivy who had come along and just decided to bless us and buy us a curry, and it was the perfect timing. So I love it when people are kind and unexpectedly bless one another, because I think that gives me joy.
So there was a few people there saying what brought them happiness. What brings you happiness, Luke?
Just thinking off the top of my head, normally Man City, anything when City win.
Of course it does.
When referees get right decisions, not like when we played Liverpool last week. Rubbish calls, by the way. I like spending time with family, and my bed brings me happiness.
Nice. For me, music always brings me happiness. And at the minute, my cats sort of do, kitten.
Plural.
I'm not sure.
Hey.
So yeah, joy is a massive thing, and it's something we always want to go after, isn't it? Like it's our ultimate. We want to be happy. It's kind of what we aim towards. Our culture always says you've got to be happy. You've got to go for joy. You've got to go for something that's going to make you happy in the moment. So it's all right if it makes you feel happy, just go for it. But actually, that isn't necessarily what God teaches. But He does want us to be joyful.
He does. So here is a video on what biblical joy means.
Being in a good mood is really great, and most languages have lots of words to describe the experience, like happy, cheerful, joyful, and so on. The same goes for the languages of the Bible. In ancient biblical Hebrew, there's a variety of words, like simcha, sason, or gil. In the Greek New Testament, there's kara, euphrosune, or agaliasis. Each word has its own unique nuance, but they all basically refer to the feeling of joy and happiness. Now, what makes these biblical joy words interesting is noticing the kinds of things that bring happiness, and also seeing how joy is a key theme that runs through the whole story of the Bible. Let's start with sources of joy. On page 1 of the Bible, God says that this world is very good. And so naturally, people find joy in beautiful and good things of life, like growing flocks or an abundant harvest on the hills. The poet of Psalm 104 says, a good bottle of wine is God's gift to bring joy to people's hearts. People find joy at a wedding or in their children. There's even a Hebrew proverb that compares the joy that perfume brings to your nose with the joy a good friend brings to your heart. However, human history isn't just a joy fest. The biblical story shows how we live in a world that's been corrupted by our own selfishness. It's marked by death and loss. And this is where biblical faith offers a unique perspective on joy. It's an attitude God's people adopt, not because of happy circumstances, but because of their hope in God's love and promise. So when the Israelites were suffering from slavery in Egypt, God raised up Moses to lead them into freedom. And the first thing the Israelites did was sing for joy. Even though they were in the middle of a desert, they were vulnerable, the promised land was still far away, they rejoiced anyway. Later biblical poets looked back on this story and they remembered how the Lord caused his people to leave with joy, his chosen ones with shouts of joy. This joy in the wilderness, this was a defining moment, a way of saying that the joy of God's people is not determined by their struggles, but by their future destiny. This theme appears later in Israel's story, when Israel suffered under the oppression of foreign empires. The prophet Isaiah looked for a day when God would raise up a new deliverer like Moses. That's when those redeemed by the Lord will return to Zion with glad shouts, with eternal joy crowning their heads. Happiness and joy will overtake them. And while the Israelites waited, they chose joy to anticipate their future redemption. This is why it's significant that when Jesus of Nazareth was born, it was announced as good news that brings great joy. We're told that Jesus himself rejoiced and gave thanks to God his Father when he began to announce the kingdom of God. He even taught his followers the same joy in the wilderness, saying, when people reject you or persecute you for following me, rejoice, be very glad, because your reward is great in heaven. After his death and resurrection, Jesus commissioned his followers to go out and announce the good news that he was the risen King of the world. And as they did so, the early Christian communities were known for being full of joy, even when they were persecuted. Like when the Apostle Paul was sitting in a dirty Roman prison, he could say that he's chosen joy, even if he gets executed. He called this the joy of faith, or joy in the Lord. He believed it was the gift of God's Spirit, a sign that Jesus' presence is with you, inspiring hope in the midst of hardship. And when you believe that Jesus' love has overcome death itself, joy becomes reasonable in the darkest of circumstances. Now, this doesn't mean that you ignore or suppress your sorrow. That's not healthy or necessary. Paul often expressed his grief about missing loved ones or losing friends or his own freedom. He called it being full of sorrow and yet rejoicing. As he acknowledged his pain, he also made a choice to trust Jesus that his loss wouldn't be the final word. This is very different from the trite advice to turn that frown upside down. Christian joy is a profound decision of faith and hope in the power of Jesus' own life and love. And that's what biblical joy is all about.
So yeah, joy is a big thing in the Bible, and that God does want us to be joyful, but kind of a joy in all circumstances. But one of my favourite verses in the Bible says, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart." Actually, it's a thing that we should take joy in God. And if we do that first, then he will give us everything else. What an amazing promise. So instead of trying to find joy in all these other things, and some of these aren't that helpful, but actually we should take our joy in God, delight in him, in Jesus, who he is, who he says he is, who he says you are. And once you start getting that, then everything else starts to fall into place. And I've definitely seen that in my life. Like this stuff with the music stuff, like to delight in the Lord and he will give you the desires of your heart. Well, apparently DJing was part of that desire. And so you might be amazed if you put God first, what he can do for you.
And that's also one of my favourite Bible verses, is on the back of that. It says, the joy of the Lord is my strength.
Yeah.
So no matter what you're going through, you could be going through a terrible season, but you can still find joy in God and who he is, and like what Emma said, in what Jesus has done for us.
Yeah. So have a joyful session.
Hey,
discussing what that can mean for you. Have a great one. We've enjoyed launch.
Yeah, we've enjoyed it. Tiring, but really good.
And I hope you enjoy your session. Take care.
See you soon,
tomorrow.
guys.
Bye.
Bye.